All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, up there in
New York City.
That was pretty good.
Yeah,
that was clean.
It's nice, isn't it?
You know what's going to happen, though? You're going to walk around. You're going to be like Jerry Seinfeld when he has the hello, but you're going to do it with your girlfriend, and she's going to be like, why do you keep calling it New York City? Why are you saying it like that?
She knows about it, and she's a fan of it. We're both what we do in the shadows fans. So.
So she knows that you do this on the show.
Yes, okay. This is a safe space for that.
Does she listen to the pod?
I have no idea, actually.
Oh,
yeah, I don't know.
Interesting. My wife does not listen to these shows.
Well, she has to hear you all day.
Yeah,
so.
that's fair.
That's kind of the thing.
I want it. Like, my dad listens religiously to all of them, and him getting the take, so he's gonna he's gonna hear that I said this, but he has the power rankings, and he'll always let me know where the power rankings are and his favorites, and not as much of a favorite. My mom doesn't listen, so it's weird. You never know who's out there.
You never do know, but I'm glad you're getting the home support though.
Yeah, exactly. Jon Tayler,
yes.
Week 1, Major League Baseball is just about in the books here. When folks are hearing this on Thursday morning, will be a week officially into the new baseball season. It's amazing that it's here. All kinds of great stuff all week long. Now, many are saying that the Atlanta Braves are for certain going to be the best team in the National League all season long. I might be pitching for them at some point this season based on where things are going with this starting rotation. But look, when you sprinkle that Braves dust on you, then anything is possible. So we'll see if I could do that, if I am called upon, John. But I want to start here. Your first week. And I feel bad talking up our starting pitching because we'll get into the Red Sox and that starting pitching situation in Boston. But down the line here, first week, biggest overreaction take. Like, you're forecasting, you look at the starts, it could be a player, it could be a team start, it could be just a thing that you've noticed just with a particular team. Your biggest week 1 overreaction is what?
Ball is juiced again.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's... I mean, look, I who knows, but I think that maybe this doesn't qualify because I don't know if it's necessarily an overreaction to say the ball is juiced because, through 1 week of play, we've seen Mike Exis at CBS Sports wrote about the home run rate, how it's pretty similar to 2019's in the early going so far. 2019, obviously, the big juice ball year. I think the problem with trying to make a take out of that or even discussing it is that, per usual, as has been the case the last few years now, we have no idea what ball MLB is using. We don't know what they're doing to it, and the league itself will simply not be transparent about the ball or the condition of the ball or how the ball is being made. So it is a perpetual X factor. We just don't know until the season starts whether or not the ball is going to be the one that flies out of the yard all the time or the one that is just kind of dead like last year's. So far, it seems like we're getting it seems like the ball is livelier. Of course, we're gonna have to wait to see and this is the case with everything when it comes to the first month or so of baseball. You have to wait and see. You have to wait and see how things play out. But obviously, at least from the early going, there's been a lot of home runs. And some of that is just because the Red Sox are forced to play games and they're just going to give a bunch of them up. But there have been a fair number of home runs so far, and it's a little... I think for me, at least, it's that sense of like, I am immediately just going to suspect that MLB has monkeyed with the ball again. And I think if you want to go full conspiracy theory for it, it would make sense that they have, because what they want, I think, in concert with the pitch clock and the shorter game times, with the bigger bases and limited pickoffs and more stealing with the advent or with the demise of the shift, they want a game that has more action in it. And to that end, I think it would make sense to have a ball that is livelier in that regard. How do we prove it? I mean, we can't really. I mean, every year it seems like now we get a piece looking at the physics of the baseball and what the actual baseball is made out of and whether or not it rates compared to one year or the other. But I wouldn't be surprised if the league has once again done something with the ball, or at least introduced a ball that is a little livelier than what we were seeing last year. But yeah, who knows? But otherwise, I think if you're looking at an overall league-wide picture, I think the kind of overreaction du jour right now is we're going to see like a record number of stolen bases this year. And I don't necessarily know that that's true. I just think that stealing bases has become, at least from the initial, like, from the first week of things, it does seem like stealing a base will be easier, slightly. I mean, I think this was at least through yesterday's games. MLB teams have posted the highest success rate on stolen bases, I think, in league history. It's something like in the low 80s percentage-wise. I will be curious to see how that holds up over the course of an entire season, especially given, how managers will be theoretically adjusting to it, how base runners will theoretically be adjusting to it, whether or not it's going to incentivize more running, whether or not it's going to do something else. But it definitely does feel like something has changed appreciably when it comes to stolen bases and just how much running, or at least how much easier it is to steal. I think the next thing to see would be, are the number of attempts and opportunities going to go up as well? I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. I mean, I think for sure we're going to see more steals this season than we probably have in a good long bit. Ben Clemens wrote an early takeaway over at Fangraphs about stolen bases and pretty much made the point that with the lack of the shift and with the limiting on pickoff moves, and especially the pitch timer too, or the pitch clock, which also impacts a pitcher's ability to hold a runner on, this is probably going to look something more like the 1980s in that regard, with something more geared, or at least I imagine that would be MLB's ideal, is something geared more toward contact and speed, except of course now with this era's power, both in terms of pitching and hitting. So that'll be interesting to see is how that all plays out. But I don't think it's an overreaction. I don't even think this is an overreaction. That the rules that MLB has introduced have so far worked. At least if the aim is, if you look at the various aims, make the game go by faster or make it shorter, whatever you want to call it, 100% the case. Games are down like half an hour on average from last season alone. I think we're averaging like 2 hours and 40 minutes a game, which is absurd. There was a Mets-Marlins game last night, or Sandy Alcantara started that finished in just under 2 hours. That's something that happened maybe once a year in previous seasons. It feels like
Greg Maddux was pitching.
Yeah, and that feels like something that maybe we now get more, or at least closer to it, games more in that 2 hour to 2.5 hour range, as opposed to consistently being 3 hours and above. In terms of the stolen base, all the changes made to the bases with pickoff moves, that has obviously had an impact. The pitch clock obviously affects both of those, and that has clearly had an impact. I think what's good to see is that hitters and pitchers seem to have adjusted pretty quickly to it. We're not seeing much in the way of violations for not being in the box or not being ready to throw a pitch. So
outside of the Red Sox, though, they had a crazy one.
That
was a terrible call. Like, he's staring. I still to this day don't understand what he did. Who was up in that situation? Do you know what I'm talking about? Was it over the weekend where he?
I must have missed this.
I think it was. I mean, they were in red. When did the Red Sox were red at home? Is there a specific day, like when the Braves were red on Friday nights?
Usually it's Friday, but they wouldn't have played on Friday.
Okay, so maybe it was Saturday when they wore it, but it was in the top or bottom of the night. It was the Orioles series, and yeah, because he was facing, and then they said he was not ready, and he was like staring right. Like, it was one of those. I forgot who was up for the Red Sox though, where they called strike 3, and he was facing the pitcher. I don't know who was on the mound for the Orioles at that particular moment, but. Yeah, I think I want to say though it was the same night they had the walk-off home run over the Green Monster.
So that would have been Saturday, but
yeah, I think it was Saturday.
Yeah, I wasn't able to watch that game in its entirety. Okay. I was out for most of the afternoon, but
by and large, the broader point here is that we're not seeing, and that was something I suspected, is they would adjust. These are professionals; they would adjust and they would get used to it because that is their job and they are good at it. And the thing too about the pitch clock and the shorter time spans. It's less about the time, I think, and more about like how it feels like time goes by, right? Where
yes.
That's the bigger thing, because you and I, we love baseball. We love watching baseball. It's more that I think everyone likes watching baseball. They just wanted to feel like it was moving. Like, it's just the actual in the moment type deal where you're like, I don't care if it's 3 hours, if it feels like one. The problem was it was 3 hours and it felt like 5 because you had these
There was a lot of dead time.
Yes.
And for sure the pitch clock does seem to have, again, we're losing half an hour a game, but it doesn't really feel like we've lost anything in terms of the game itself. Yeah. It's all moving faster. And I think that's something definitely that takes some getting used to. I know personally my internal clock for baseball is, I have all day between pitches. I can just browse my phone. I can look at something on my laptop. I can, do whatever it is I want to do, only to realize, no, I have 20 seconds. And then so the pace of it has been a little, it's taken some adjustment for sure, but I think it's something that we're all probably going to get used to pretty quickly because it is uniform. It isn't a case where it's just one team happens to be faster at this or, some pitchers get to be slower. Everything. No, everyone is locked into the same thing. And that's also part of, I know there's been some discussion already from a variety of places of, do we want to keep this as a standard pitch clock all the time, in bigger moments in the postseason, isn't there an argument to be made for letting a little more time go so that players have a little more time to catch their breath, to think about what's going on? Fine, I understand that, but at the same time, if you're going to introduce this, you kind of have to hold to it, because otherwise it's just, the more you do this, the more we get used to it. I think the more there is essentially no going back from it, because people, I think, the one thing I will be interested to see, and I know that this is, I haven't been to a game in person yet, and I didn't see the WBC because the WBC was using the old rules, but I am curious how it's going to affect the in-game experience for fans and whether or not, because essentially if you're a fan at a baseball game, we're saying, you're losing a half hour, but you're not losing any baseball. But if you're a fan at the game, you're losing a half hour of being there. Yeah. And granted, there are caveats to that, obviously. Some fans do not stay the entire game. For them, this means, well, now I have an opportunity to stay the entire game, particularly if you've got kids, and kids are, most small children are going to force you to leave that game early. Now you actually have a chance of staying a little bit longer and seeing a little bit more of the action. I think the flip side of that is, it used to be if you went to get concessions during an inning break, you might miss half an inning while you're, going to a stand, waiting in line, getting your food, and getting back to your seat. There's a decent chance now you could miss a full inning of baseball just by getting up to go get a hot dog. To say nothing of people like me who like to just kind of wander around the park sometimes or take a leisurely stroll on the concourse. You're going to be missing a fair amount of baseball now if you do that.
John's baseball stadium connoisseur over here. He's getting it all. I just imagine John just going and his arms behind him, his back as he's strolling.
I'm very much like an elderly Italian man, just kind of shuffling along with my hands behind my back, just kind of nodding at everything and
taking it all in, getting the
just
smells.
stopping in front of the hamburger stand and just watching them make hamburgers for a minute and then moving on. But I think part of this, though, is that the pitch clock stuff was very clearly about making the pace of the game improve, but primarily, I think, with regards to television. Mm-hmm. In part because, television is the biggest driver of revenue for Major League Baseball. They make more money off TV deals than they do off of anything else. So they want the game to be something that you can turn on at night and know, hey, I think kind of similar to soccer. Hey, with soccer, it's I know exactly how long this game is going to last. 45-minute half, 10-minute or 15-minute halftime, 45-minute half, and we're out. I think baseball wants something a lot closer to that experience where you can plan in your head, hey, this is going to take less than 3 hours, I know I'm going to be able to start this game at 7. It's going to be over before I decide to go to bed because I need to be up the next morning for work or school or whatever it happens to be. I don't know how well that works with the in-person experience, particularly because there are a lot of stadiums, cough Yankee Stadium, that are really, really unbelievably bad at getting people into the stadium, literally through the gates, into the stadium, into their seats in anything approaching a reasonably quick fashion. So that's another thing that I think fans need to be have to keep in mind is, how early do you now want to be getting to a ball game if you know that you're going to have to go through security, you're going to have to go through lines, it's going to take you time to find your seat, If you roll up at 5 minutes before first pitch, you're probably going to miss the entire first inning, if not maybe a good chunk of the second in the process. So that, I think, is going to be an adjustment. I know we're kind of far afield now from the overreaction stuff. I mean, part of me, I think part of me is just I've just been in baseball media long enough to feel like my brain just doesn't let me do this anymore, where I just watch April baseball and I'm like, I can't react to any of this except unless it's the Red Sox or unless it's someone getting hurt, because not that April doesn't matter, but there is that feel to it of none of this is really set in stone yet. None of this is really, everyone's still kind of finding their feet. It's funny, we're gonna talk about the Dodgers, and I was looking at Trace Thompson's stat line. He's got a slugging percentage close to 1,100, but that's because he has 3 home runs. Yeah, and those 3 home runs are his only 3 hits on the season. So I'm not, it's. For me, it's kind of the overreaction, I guess, is I don't know. Is it an overreaction to say that the Rays are a really good baseball team, given that they're off to a perfect start? You know, is it an overreaction? I think maybe the overreactions usually go in the other direction, where it's like the Phillies are 1-4. You know, are they really bad? Did we all miss something? Or is this just a random 5-game stretch where they happen to play poorly, but it also just happens to come at the start of the season? And I think for other teams, it's a little bit easier to say, you know, hey, this 5-game stretch at the beginning of the season is indicative of something, like the Red Sox, as opposed to, hey, this is just a bad 5-game stretch, like the Phillies. And I think, you know, we'll talk about the Phillies more too, but the vibe I kind of get is that, like, if you're a bad team and you get off to a bad start, I think you can overreact in that direction because you were already kind of expecting this to be a bad team. And I think similarly, if you're a good team and you get off to a good start, obviously no one's going to come out here and say that, you know, the Braves or the Rays are going to win 120 games, except for you. But I think there's a feeling of, yeah, this team is doing as well as expected because turns out they actually are a good team. Probably something, I think if you want to make the overreactions, it's probably find one of those teams kind of in the middle that we weren't really sure about and say, oh, these guys look much better than expected, or these guys are doing way worse than we expected. You know,
are we sure the Reds or Pirates can't win the NL Central?
Look, it's the NL Central. Clearly, no one cares. But
oh, hold on, Marmol cares.
Well, if you want
Tyler
a real
O'Neill, get out of here, sir.
Let's get a real good overreaction coming after today's Pirates win over the Red Sox. After they finish sweeping the Red Sox, a projected last place team sweeping another projected last place team. The Pittsburgh Pirates bullpen has an ERA under 2 in 20 innings with a strikeout rate of 26%. That's great. Do the Pirates actually have like one of the best bullpens in baseball? And that's an interesting thing because I don't really think anyone can say definitively right now yes or no. I think it's probably easier to lean toward no, they do not. But, you know, because again, we're talking of a sample of just 20 innings for like 7 different guys. But at the same time, these are the kinds of things I think that when they pop out, instead of being like, oh, the Rays are 5-0, what do we make of that? Well, the Rays are good, and they also got to start their season with Detroit and Washington, or 5-1, whatever the Rays happen to be. Whereas the Pirates bullpen just performing well, now that's something interesting now, isn't it? Who are the guys in this bullpen who are performing well? And I think maybe that's the case too, is to kind of look on the individual level and be like, ooh, who are the guys doing super well right now? Part of the problem there too also is that, like, you know, it's been 6 games or 7 games or however it's been for most of these guys. You know, I was looking at Max Muncy's Baseball Savant page. He has exactly 9 batted balls. 9. Like, 9. Like, you usually can't make any judgments really of any sort until about 50 batted balls or so. There's a lot of talk about, you know, when can you start believing the stats? And I think the stickiest stat is swing rate, all the various stats that are around swing rate. And usually you want to get at least like 30 or 40 plate appearances deep into those before you start really looking. So I think, you know, I feel like I'm not being fun with this though. I feel like you're looking for something crazy here. You're looking for some
you're
real
Fangraphsy. You're too Fangraphsy now, John. That's what's happened.
I'm too immersed in this world of geeks and stats and
too
being
smart,
reasonable.
Measured. Yeah, everyone's reasonable. Everyone's reasonable, and it's smart and it's good.
But I think part of
what we launch in there into Fangraphs, just the take Fangraphs guy, like that would be so
that's
jarring to so many readers. If y'all
I need to resign from Fangraphs and start TakeGraphs, where it's just nothing but red hot takes all the time, based on absolutely nothing but my own personal intuition.
I love TakeGraphs. No one get that domain. That's
gonna be our new regular segment, TakeGraphs, where I just unleash the dumbest possible take off the last week of baseball.
John, can you do this?
Absolutely nothing.
I
actually kind of like this. I kind of like this idea now. TakeGraphs.
I love TakeGraphs.
I got to make sure it's not going to get me sued, which I don't actually know.
I think it's like dumb Starbucks, right? Like,
yeah, basically. I mean, that's
also,
basically the idea, right?
Like, I feel like you can ask this one. Be like, can we be TakeGraphs? Like, this is fine.
It's all good fun. I do like that idea. Actually, here's an overreaction. If the Blue Jays can't get their rotation in order, they are not going to make the playoffs. There we go. And part of that is the 2 main issues they have right now are Chris Bassett's coming out throwing like 2 miles an hour under his average velocity, which is a problem. And Jose Barrios clearly is not better. Like, and that's one thing too, where I think it's easier to feel like you're overreacting there, because it's like, this isn't like based off of one bad start. Like, this isn't based off of, like, you know, Jacob deGrom having a terrible opening day start and going, he's finished, he's done, his arm is trash. Like, no, he came back today and he struck out 11 guys in 6 innings. He's still Jacob deGrom, as it turns out. But Barrios is doing exactly what we saw last year, exactly what we saw in the WBC, and exactly what we saw in spring training. Throwing a billion hittable fastballs right down the pike with no real chance of success on them. So I think, I don't remember when we talked about the Blue Jays how much, if at all, we talked about, the back of that rotation is kind of there's some potential issues there.
We were just like, the offense is too good. Like the offense
is great. The offense is very clearly great, but this was a problem, I think, for the Blue Jays going into the season was Barrios and potentially then also the fifth starter, which right now is Yusei Kikuchi, who pitched okay against the Royals, but the Royals are a very bad offense, so I don't know how much you can take out of that. And at the same time, like Bassett, I think was kind of the hinge there. Bassett, I think, was one where it's like, if Bassett is good, this team will be fine. If Bassett struggles, this team is in real trouble because they only have really two reliable starters right now, it feels like, in Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman. So there's my overreaction that if the Blue Jays cannot get better starting pitching than what they've gotten so far, they will not make the playoffs. But you know what's funny? That doesn't even feel like an overreaction. That just feels true. Like, that's just the case. Like, if you only have 2 good starters out of 5, you're probably not going to make the playoffs.
This is incredible. Like, John is out here workshopping and getting closer and closer to coming out with his overreaction.
The Mets are going to be a last place team. Let's go with that one. That's not actually possible because the Nationals are an absolute disaster. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, well, CJ Abrams just made another error while we were recording this podcast.
Aww.
Atlanta kid, but man, that he struggled in that opening weekend. That kid,
it's really something when bad teams force players to do stuff that they're just clearly not capable of doing, and someone in the Nationals organization was clearly like, "No, he can do this." I understand the idea that
feels very Mondesi to me. Remember when Mondesi got called up super quick and it was all over? He just loses all of his confidence and he just never really recovered.
Part of me thinks I understand the idea of let the guy fail off the position. Give him the challenge, and if he doesn't meet it, then okay, you reassess your options and move forward. But when you have pretty much every evaluator in agreement that this dude is just not a shortstop, he's not going to be able to play the position, it's not where he should be, and the Nationals are insisting on doing it anyway. This is, I think, a thing we've talked about with the Nationals, where it's like the decision-making process for that team. And granted, it's a mess right now because no one really seems to be in charge.
And they're not selling until after the season, where you're like,
well, they're not selling until the Mason dispute with the Orioles is resolved, and that's been an ongoing court thing for the last decade, basically.
I was gonna say, when I saw that, I was like, that can't be a sticking point because I don't think that's getting resolved. Like, I don't know. Are you just going to hold the team hostage for years?
Essentially, I mean, that's what this whole Mason thing has been for the longest time. And there's no real reason that the Orioles are just going to, unless something weird happens with the Orioles. And granted, Orioles ownership is not exactly made itself sound good over the last year.
Which is also weird. I'm reading the Joe Torre book with Verducci, the Yankee years. And reading in like the early part of like the Orioles are obviously they were great in the mid 90s and 95, 96, and when the Yankees won, and they didn't, I don't know who they beat in the World Series in 96. The team escapes me in that regard. So
no one can remember truly.
Like many of us forget. And the Orioles had the number 2 payroll. It's just like this thing, and then I'm just going back through it. It's like it's just hard to imagine that the Baltimore Orioles were just this powerhouse, and they spent all this money. Well, because now in 2023, they're like, look, we don't have the funds. Look, we can't do it. We can't do anything this offseason. Well, I think Grayson Rodriguez, so maybe that's nice.
It feels like a situation like with any other team where someone bought them and then passed it down essentially to their fail sons.
Yeah.
That Peter Angelos clearly cared more about baseball in Baltimore and about fielding a winning team in Baltimore than John Angelos does. I don't think he really cares. I kind of get the feeling that if the Orioles win, he'll be like, great, that's great. And if the Orioles don't win, he'll be like, whatever, as long as I didn't spend too much money in the process. That is the vibe I get off of John Angelos, and one of those things that makes, again, one of those dangers of having one of those owners where their plan is just to give it to their family, to give the team to the family eventually. You don't know what you're going to end up with. You don't know if you're going to end up with a Kendall Roy in charge.
The best case scenario for those is that they're not interested and they just hire well. They're just like, I don't want to be involved, but here's the keys, Brian Cashman, here's the keys, insert smart mind here. And
but then more likely is you end up with a guy like Chris Ilitch.
Yeah.
Who just not only doesn't care, but doesn't want to spend the money involved to make the team. Like, and it's one of those things where then sell it. Sell the team. Like, you almost want to tell the Angelos family, if you're really this unpleasant about Baltimore, then just sell the team already. Like, what are you holding on to this for? But anyway, okay, there's my overreaction. The Orioles are going to get sold. That's not even an overreaction to anything. That's just me just not liking the Angelos family. But anyway.
I love it, John. 1 week team study series. So we're going to do 2 a week and just kind of check in on those 2 particular teams and what's going on, how they did and how they fared. The Dodgers, 4-2. You mentioned Trace Thompson, 3 homers, slugging really well. We joked about it in the offseason. We're like, are they really going to Trace Thompson? It's like, oh, because it's the Dodgers. And they're just like, well, they're going to do Dodger things.
They always do Dodgers things.
They always do Dodger things. How have they looked, and your positives and negatives through 6 games for LA?
Well, I think if you want to look at the positives, and we talked a lot about how with the losses the Dodgers had this offseason, the fact that they weren't really all that active in the free agent market, that you're looking at guys like Thompson and James Outman and Miguel Vargas and being like, you sure that's what you're going to go with? Like that's what you want in your lineup? It turns out the Dodgers know what they're doing with that regard. James Outman looks like a viable caliber major league hitter at the very least against right-handed pitching. Miguel Vargas turns out he has a very good eye at the plate. He's got a walk rate over 50% right now, which obviously is not going to hold for the entire season. He's not Barry Bonds, but it shows that there is some level of talent there that is legitimate. I think similarly, with Thompson, it's like he's never been a guy who's been known to be a patient guy at the plate, but he's always had a ton of power in his bat. He's always been, had a quick bat, and you saw that with the 3 home runs against Arizona. But I think, similar to the Rays, I think the Dodgers are one of those teams that, even if the ingredients are subpar, so to speak, or even if it's not all-stars all around the diamond, they're still so adept at finding the combinations of guys who essentially put together work in that capacity. Just either it's platoons everywhere, or either it's taking advantage of some level of some defensive inefficiency to put a guy somewhere where he's better than what he looks like, or it's something like, whatever it happens to be, that is what the Dodgers excel at. It's making not just fielding all-star teams whenever they feel like, but also making chicken salad out of whatever chicken shit they happen to have been handed. So, and I think, the other side of things with the Dodgers is when you look at them and what they've done so far is, oh, the pitching is good. That's right. The pitching is good. They have Julio Urias and Dustin May and Clayton Kershaw. Those guys are good. Granted, like the issue that we're going to run into there is Kershaw is inevitably going to be hurt at some point in the season. May is, coming back off Tommy John surgery. Urias has never been the greatest picture of durability. Noah Syndergaard, okay, you say 30 like it's 50. I'm like, and I know you're past that point,
John.
too.
I turned 32 in 2 weeks, so I'm just saying, Syndergaard is he's now in the 30s.
He's now in the 30s, and the velocity clearly is not there. I think the way we were all kind of expecting when the Dodgers signed him, but he still, he showed that he could get by without the velocity. They have a plethora, a passel, a large contingent of great young guys in the minors. They have Michael Grove up right now, Ryan Pepio eventually when he comes back from injury, Gavin Stone. There is just clearly so much talent still on this roster and in that system, and it's guys like Vargas and Outman who are just pulled out of the minors. I mean, Vargas, granted, was a very high prospect for them. Outman less so. The thing I'll be interested in going forward for them is when it comes to guys like Thompson or Jason Hayward or JD Martinez, those kind of older guys or guys who are more kind of considered to be, reserve players, bit players, they're going to be asking a lot from those guys over the course of the season. I know I just said, they do such a good job out of kind of creating these viable kind of combo players or platoon options. But to a certain degree, like that's also reliant on like 33-year-old Jason Hayward, who hasn't hit basically since 2017. Like, them being the guys to fix him, because otherwise it doesn't really matter who you platoon Jason Hayward with if he hits like he did with the Cubs. You're just not going to get nearly enough value out of that. Similarly, it's not really going to matter, what your DH rotation is if JD Martinez just isn't hitting. And so far he's hit okay, but those are all the things to keep an eye on. Is I think when it comes to the Dodgers, when it comes to utilizing those non-all-star players, is the floor is always lower with those guys. And I think what we're waiting to see with the Dodgers is, well, can they keep that floor high enough? Basically just, can they keep the floor high enough to get at least like league average or functioning production out of those guys? Or are they going to have to be patching holes later on in the season? Like injuries obviously will play a part in that. And that's, true for the pitching staff as well. But, so far so good. So far the guys the Dodgers were going to rely on, despite the fact everyone was going, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that. So far they've been reliable, and that's going to be what has to continue for them to keep this up. I mean, obviously also
I just guess with them what's going to happen, my gut is like basically they're going to ping pong, where Hayward and Thompson and guys like that are going to have these hot starts and they're going to have a great month, and then it's like you look at the dog.
Yeah, I figured it'd be a nice distraction. But continue.
There you go. What is his name or her name?
Ezra. I like the idea that people listening to this cannot, like, all they heard is just like, oh, look at the dog, as if you were just looking out your own window or something.
Well, there are people watching, John,
there are
on
people
YouTube,
watching.
so they'll see this, and this is going to be the Chase Thomas podcast out of context here
That's
for
wonderful.
this week. But look at Ezra, very sleepy. Very sleepy.
He's a sleepy old man.
Why do our dogs go to sleep when we do podcasts? It's not a good sign.
Well, our voices soothe them, clearly.
Let's hope that's the case, because Khaleesi is passed out next to me. I think what will happen is they just ping pong, where it's like certain guys, and then Muncy and Freeman has this power surge this month, and the power's back, and he's hitting, and then it's like, Miguel Rojas is hitting, and then he falls off a cliff, and then it's like Hayward's back, and Hayward has a great. That's what I think they're counting on. It's just they're gonna do enough with their pitching, they're gonna do enough with the bullpen. They have their stars. Mookie's gonna get to that MVP level. Freeman's gonna be fine. And then they're just hoping that those kind of role player veterans just alternate getting hot and cold at different times of the year.
I think that makes sense. And I think, obviously, so much of what the Dodgers, rely on isn't just like, oh, can we pair James Outman and Trace Thompson into a viable platoon? It's also, is Max Muncy healed? Is his elbow okay? Is he going to be able to hit the ball hard? And, all of that is still TBD, but so much of what the Dodgers do is going to be, reliant on those non-Mookie Betts, non-Freddie Freeman guys, non-Kershaw guys to be able to produce at least league average, to be able to give at least league average production, and ideally way better than that.
On the flippity flop, the Philadelphia Phillies.
On the Phility flop.
Oh, the Philadelphia flop.
Flippity.
Many are saying, how have they not used that? I hope the local newspaper have used that Philly flop to start this year, because of the way the season has started. 1-5 out of the gate here. A mess all across the board, John. But the positives and the negatives for the Philadelphia Phillies.
The positive is that none of these games were at home, so that no one could burn the stadium down. I mean, and this is the thing we talk about, where it's like you don't want to overreact to 1 week of baseball, especially like when it comes to a Phillies team where, look, 2 of their losses were because Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler got their brains beat in. Is that something you expect to continue for the entirety of the season? Barring something that none of us understand or know about? No. Those 2 guys will be fine. They just happen to have 2 bad starts right next to one another at the beginning of the season. I'm more concerned about stuff like, the fact that they lost Rhys Hoskins so late in spring training, no real ability to replace him. The first attempt that they tried with Derek Hall not only didn't work, but Hall, I mean, I shouldn't say didn't work. It's only been like 6 games, but he is now hurt, and the Phillies are going to have to go to someone else. They're calling up Cody Clemens. I cannot imagine Cody Clemens is actually going to get any level of long run, but the first base is going to continue to be an issue for this team until and unless they find a suitable replacement for Hoskins. I don't think it's going to be Derek Hall or however. I like hearing it in my head as Derek Hall, but either way, that was already going to be a problem for them. And I do wonder how much of this too is a combination of kind of World Series hangover and also just the sheer negative just heaviness of, man, we lost our starting first baseman like 2 days before the season started. That's a rough one to come back from psychically. That clubhouse probably is not the most joyful place in that regard. Yeah. But some of this too is just going to be a matter of like, again, as with the Dodgers, as with so many other teams, what are you going to get out of your non-star performers? And for the Phillies, that was already going to be asking a lot with Bryce Harper down. It's asking all that much more with Rhys Hoskins down. You have to see now, obviously, what can you get out of first base? You're hoping you can get more out of, Nick Castellanos in right field. Whoever it happens to be in right field.
He's been bad. That's something to monitor. He's not good out of the gate. That outfield looks like if Kyle Schwarber has a down year and that like he doesn't have the kind of year that he had last year, and Bryce Harper obviously not being there, you're like, I don't know, man. This is one of this is a pretty ugly outfield, and then you already have the first base hole.
And that's something we talked about last season, too, when Harper initially hurt his elbow and basically had to spend the rest of the year DHing, was that this outfield defensively stinks.
Yeah.
It's very bad because of Schwarber and Castellanos in the corners, and it's something you can live with that Castellanos is hitting. It's completely untenable if he's not. And I think you're right that Castellanos is probably the Phillies hitter we need to pay the most attention to for the course of April, because if he gets off to another slow start, or if it's clear that, he's lost something bat speed wise, in terms of being able to hit fastballs, in terms of being able to hit whatever it is he's trying to do, the Phillies are in for a bad time. They cannot really, that lineup is so thinned out right now with Harper and Hoskins both down. They cannot really make do with Castellanos being a total non-entity as well. That Phillies team got where it got last year because it had Harper and Hoskins all year, and even though they weren't MVPs by any stretch, they were still way better than what the Phillies could have run out otherwise. Something similar, I think, is the lack of position player depth right now, which is really kind of hurting the Phillies. I think when you look at, granted, Christian Pache, the lamented former Brave, as good an option as you could ask for in terms of a guy to step into center field and hold a glove for like 2 innings at the end of a game.
Yeah.
But not really the guy you want to be your primary backup outfielder because he just cannot hit,
Sad.
And it makes you question whether or not the trade where Philadelphia sent Matt Vierling and Phil Maton to the Tigers for Gregory Soto, I think everyone more or less thought it was a pretty good deal at the time. The Phillies needed some bullpen depth, and very clearly, I think the gamble on Craig Kimbrell has not really looked very good so far. I can understand the desire for Soto, but they really did sacrifice some really useful bench depth in that deal, and I think that's already starting to come back to bite them a bit.
Well, that's why you draft Mickey Moniak number 1 overall for these type of scenarios.
And I think this is also the thing where, again, like, the Phillies' depth has just been impacted by the fact that they just have not done a good job drafting and developing players in the last 5 or so years. And I think that's where something like, when you do have a success like Vierling, ideally, you trade that. Maybe you trade that guy to help you somewhere else. But I think in retrospect, I do wonder if Dave Dombrowski's thinking, man, I kind of wish I'd actually held on to my right-handed hitting backup outfielder who could play center field and actually knew what to do when holding the bat, as opposed to we have to roster Christian Pache all year now, or otherwise we're going to lose him again, or we're going to lose him. Which I mean, I don't know if Christian
what's
Pache
happening
even
right
makes
now?
it through
Dom
April,
is calling Colorado over and over again. He's like, all right, I understand Chris is loving the vibes. But like Bryce needs him. I need him. He needs to play a corner outfield spot for us. Like it just has to happen.
No way Chris Bryant wants to go to Philadelphia and deal with any of that. He made himself pretty clear when he decided to take Colorado's money. He was just done with.
But like I just imagine Bryce is like, come on, man. Come on.
Yeah, the Vegas to Vegas connection.
Yeah, like
then they got to go after Joey Gallo in Minnesota and make it ultimate.
I don't know. I look, Dombrowski's one of my favorite GMs of the last 20 years because he's just such a different kind of general manager, and he's obviously had a lot of success. He's also just blown up franchises for the long term with his strategy, but I like it because it's different.
Look, you don't hire Dave Dombrowski unless you're going to spend money and destroy your farm system.
Correct.
You know what you're getting in that exchange.
Phillies aren't developing. So it's like I am very curious to see what he does if this slow start continues into June because at least he's not going to be patient. They're going to do some other big thing.
And for you can argue the Phillies are developing on the pitching side with Andrew Painter and Mick Abel and Griff McGarry, but obviously with Painter down for indefinitely, at least with that elbow sprain, that was one of the big potential depth pieces that the Phillies were ideally looking to add at some point during the season was one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. That's probably not going to be the case this season, or at very least not until late in the season. So I think you're right, though. I think Dombrowski is not a guy to sit on his hands if things aren't working. And I think that, again, a team to keep a very close eye on, because the other part of this, too, is that with Atlanta off to a hot start, and with the Mets obviously being a talented team, and with the Marlins being there present, and at the very least... I
mean, just, come on, folks. Like, this is not keeping up with the Marlins. Like,
but I think that the Phillies really, I didn't pick them to win the East, and I don't expect them to win the East, but at the same time, like, they can't let themselves fall too far back in that division, because they don't want to be in a position where you have to win a wild card to make the postseason. I think that was already going to be the case for them.
Yeah.
But I don't think you want to have to accept that by Mother's Day that you have already put yourself into. Well, we've lost the division,
Well, the season's over, just like the Family Guy gif. Last big national thing, John. The Rays 6-0 now.
Yes.
Like just really bonker stuff. So they obviously carved up the Red Sox. Rays have outscored their opponents. I saw this on Twitter. 27-5 in their first 4 games. So that was how the Bo Sox staff allowed 30 runs in those 4 games.
Oh wait, the Rays played Detroit to start the season.
Oh, okay, Detroit.
A very bad Tigers team.
There you go. And then Rays baseball has played 5 games, or this was the tweet yesterday. They played 5 games this year. They have won all 5 by at least 4 runs. The only other team in MLB history with a streak that long to begin a season was the St. Louis Maroons in 1884, and they did it 13 straight. I mean, the Rays are, look, we can play the tape. I had the Rays winning the AL East before the year, where I'm like, this is a classic bounce back Rays, where everyone's going to talk themselves into the Blue Jays and the Yankees and, hey, the Orioles. And then you saw a little bit of that buzz of like, are we sure the Red Sox might just not overachieve here?
They will not.
They will not overachieve, John.
No.
The Rays are just sitting here with like their aces at the top, playing great baseball all across the board. Like they have their dudes, they develop well, the pitching's electric, and I'm like, nah, the Rays are going to be awesome. The Rays, I think this is not an overreaction to say the Rays are one of the best teams in baseball, and I think this is pretty scary stuff. Right?
I don't think that's an overreaction if all the health holds. I think one particular thing is Wander Franco being healthy for a full season would be such a huge thing for that team.
Yes.
People forget. I hate using that construction, but people forget. He's only 22 years old.
Yes.
You know, he is a phenomenal baseball player. There was
He's so good the Rays paid early. Like the Rays were like, the Rays paid this man.
Like there's a reason this man was the number one prospect in baseball. I believe 2 times over. You know, before he came to the majors. So it's going to be that, and I think it's also going to be, you know, the pitching and what they can get out of that if everyone could stay healthy there. I mean, last year the Rays were a fine team. They just had to deal with the fact that everyone got hurt, and even a team with as much depth as the Rays just can't survive if you're losing a starter basically every week, and that was more or less what was happening to them. So I think a Rays team with a healthy Wander Franco, a healthy Brandon Lau, a healthy pitching staff, a healthy bullpen, that team goes far. You know, that team is a winner.
They're the World Series favorite. Like the Astros are banged up. They're struggling out of the gate. We'll see.
It's really notable with Houston. Look at the bottom half of that lineup. It is really thin, really fast for them. And that's a team that needs Jose Abreu to kind of continue to be Jose Abreu, essentially. They cannot afford for this to be essentially the first year of him teetering over the cliff because you know, they are not in position to survive that kind of offensive drop-off. But I definitely think Tampa has gotten off to a great start, and I think Tampa has shown that, you know, again, a healthy Rays team, granted a healthy Rays team that got to face 2 of the worst teams in baseball right off the bat, but nonetheless, a healthy Rays team is a genuine contender for the division and also for the World Series, and I think, you know, I think that's what we're going to see going forward, so long as they stay healthy.
John, we have to do this. Your 60 seconds on the Red Sox roundup.
Oh, for God's sake. I mean, I don't know what there would have been to expect from a team that started Corey Kluber twice in the first week, like on purpose. Who is Corey Kluber, who is topping out, I believe, at around 88 or 89 miles an hour now, which is great. Look, there's a reason every major projection system said the Red Sox were going to be at best a 500 team, and I think you've seen it so far in what they've played. They have a bad pitching staff. They have a bullpen with not very much depth. They have a lineup that really gets thin after the, you know, from the bottom down, or the bottom half of the lineup is still pretty thin. They're and I say fundamentally, I mean just the simple baseball fun. They're bad at fundamentals. They're bad at fielding. They're bad at base running. At a certain point, and I don't want to overreact to a week of baseball, although I do. But at a certain point, you kind of have to wonder. It's like, what exactly are the Red Sox doing? Because this does not feel like a team that is any different from 2022 right now. This feels like the exact same team with some with some different players, but the same end result, which is they're not good. They don't have good pitching. They don't play good defense, and it's a feast or famine offense that, you know, goes dead for long stretches of time and then randomly erupts at others. So I don't know. I mean, look, again, projected to be a last place team for a reason. Not doing anything to suggest that that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's bad, John.
It's not great.
I think the season's over. I don't think we're getting the Red Sox being average. I think this is just going to be a really bad.
Like I said, 500 at best with real significant downside if there's poor health or if guys underperform. You know, I
might
think
have the worst rotation in baseball.
It's really close. I mean, I think Colorado is still worse, and I think Detroit is probably worse, and I think
really scraping the bottom.
No, I think
here.
But that's the thing. I think the Nationals rotation is worse. But you're right. Like we're talking about the worst teams in baseball right now, and the Red Sox have a rotation that's right there with them. I mean, 500 at best. But look, if this kind of play continues, I wouldn't be surprised if this team loses 90 or more games, because there is just not a lot of talent at the major league level right now, and it's there kind of in bits and pieces.
Do you know who's not going to lose 90 games this year, John?
The Atlanta Braves.
The Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves are really good at baseball.
Yes, they are. They're a very smart, very well-run franchise.
They are. And Spencer Strider has like a 40% K percentage. Like, I watched this whole start on Saturday against the Nats. And the dude's an animal. Like everyone I've heard nationally, and like even Braves fans, I wonder if they feel this way. Like obviously Kyle Wright's not ready out of the gate. Strider only has his couple of pitches, but like he is so confident, and he is scaring the hell out of these guys. Like just his batters, he's just ferocious. Like that man is an animal. He personifies 99. He is going at dudes. I think
it's the
better.
mustache.
I think it's the mustache, but it's also like Fried, who got hurt with the cold and the hamstring, and they're being cautious. So I think he'll be back in a couple weeks, but you don't want to mess with that and have it tear, and then you're like, oh, he's gone for the year. Too important. But I will say, like, who's the ace? It's like, it's Strider. I think people are just nervous to say that because it's like Fried's been consistent and been the guy longer, but I'm like,
I mean, I think you could
if
argue...
I have to pick anyone in this rotation, or I have to pick one Brave for a one-game wild card or World Series, it's like, no, it's Strider, and I don't really think it's close. That man is on another level.
I think you could argue that when Fried is back and healthy, they're co-aces, but I totally get what you're saying. Like the dude has ace stuff, ace mentality, ace performance. Like, you know, he's a number one.
There's some Garrett Cole to him.
There is some Garrett Cole there, but he very much is a number one pitcher, and the Braves are very lucky that they have him.
Yeah, and I mean, you're not gonna believe this, John. Marcell Ozuna still stinks. Like,
what a shocker! What a shock that a dude who has looked just cooked beyond belief the last 2 seasons remains. I think that, you know, not an overreaction, but if a dude has looked bad the last couple seasons and starts the season also looking bad, I think it's fair at that point to say maybe things are not going to get better. Like, again, it's, you know, I don't want to overreact too much to good or bad one way or the other, but I think it's easier for guys like Barrios or Ozuna, where it's like, no, this still looks like the same problems you were having last season. Like, nothing has changed. You know?
Yeah, he's awful, and he's gotten 16 plate appearances, and he's not making it to June. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there. He will not be in a Braves uniform in the next 2 months. Like, this is he will be DFA'd sooner rather than later, because this is just this is atrocious. But it helps too that Rosario's hitting. But I will say the one thing, and this is like one of those beggar, like Matt Olson's gonna be a wild ride this year. Like, he has a 50% K rate, basically. And you watch him, like, every time Matt Olson, my guy, is up, it's either a home run or a strikeout.
That feels right.
He is, like, just leaning into that altogether. But I don't like that at the 2-hole, John. Like, I don't like the lineup construction. And it sounds silly because they're 6-1, and, like, you have Acuna at the top. But I would move them around. I don't like the Braves lineup. I would move Michael Harris up. I don't like him in that 6th spot. Travis d'Arnaud is awesome, and when he's in the lineup, I think he's going to continue. But like, I would move it around a little bit. I would move Olson down because I just don't like the swing and for the fences or strike out at number 2, and Acuna obviously being a big home run guy and gets on base. But like, Michael Harris, I think fits that mold to me. Where I understand you want to give him too much too soon, but he's a great base runner. Put him on early. I don't know. I would adjust a little bit. Maybe you move Austin Riley to the 2 spot, and then you put Matt Olson at that 3 spot. I don't know. I don't like the lineup construction. I would move it around a little bit.
I get that, and you know, I hear what you're saying about Olson too. That that propensity to strike out high up in the order can be a problem. But on the other hand, it's Matt Olson, so I feel like
it's beggars can't be choosers. Like, the Braves are awesome. I'm not saying it's a panic situation, but I would tinker with that a little bit. Like, Acuna just wanting to bat first all the time is kind of annoying, because I'm like, I want him batting second forever. Like, I would just prefer Acuna always in the 2-hole and Michael Harris leading off. Like, that's what I would prefer in a perfect world. But I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think Acuna has like a superstition about like batting leadoff. Like, there's something too where it's like, nope, I'm only an MVP when I'm batting leadoff. I don't feel comfortable and I can't hit when I'm not in the leadoff spot. So
I could see that too.
It is what it is. Jon Tayler, we in here. Favorite Fangraphs piece of the week.
I got to give a shout out to Esteban Rivera, one of our contributors, who is a fantastic kind of mechanics guy. If you've read him at Fangraphs, you know what I'm talking about. He does a really great job breaking down pitching and hitting. He had a really good article this week about Anthony Volpe using the vault lead, which is something that apparently is commonplace in high school and college baseball, but not so much at the majors.
The what lead?
The vault lead, a particular way of leading off bases in order to steal bases, where you basically take a little shuffle step after your primary lead. It's really good. It has some great GIF breakdowns of how Volpe is doing this. It makes essentially a really good case for how someone like Volpe, who has been pretty consistently graded as having not below average speed, but certainly not like elite speed, somewhere in that average to above average range, how he is such a good base runner and base stealer. I definitely encourage everyone to check that out. Go back and check out Esteban's other stuff too. He wrote during spring training a really good piece too on Jared Kelenic and how his swing looked better. Hasn't played out in real life so far, but hey, that's baseball. So definitely give that one a look or give it a read, especially if you're interested at all in base running. Similarly, Esteban also had a piece about catcher defense based on the new StatCast blocking above average statistic that highlighted some really good blocking done by the top 5 names on that list. Esteban used to catch in college, so he brings some experience to that one and what to look for. So definitely recommend that. It's a little what I like about it's a little different flavor than what we normally do. Normally we're on the statistical analysis, but this is something more concerned with mechanics and stuff like that. So definitely check that out. We also have something on the Braves shortstop situation, Orlando Arcia.
I saw with that.
Who may actually have been the best choice, as it turns out.
He's good, but I will say, early. It's very early.
It's very early.
Let's just see. He's been good for right now, but let's just see. And you extended him. I think the plan is still utility and to call up.
I think that makes sense, but I think if you're a Braves fan who was worried that, oh no, this is going to be a disaster, why not just Vaughn Grissom? I think Jake makes a pretty good case, Jake Mailhot that is, makes a pretty good case for why Arcia is the guy, and also that Grissom may not be the guy for quite a bit. I think there's some genuine concern on Atlanta's part that he cannot handle the position defensively.
Well, that means Shoemake. It's your job this summer.
Which makes me wonder if you're a Braves fan, do you really want Braden Shoemake and his pretty much invisible bat there over Arcia, who seems to be at the very least average at both sides of the ball?
Well, that's why you bring back the Dansby Swanson clone, Charlie Culberson.
Well, he is there back again, so
yeah.
Charlie Culberson back. Charlie Culberson's season is back. Man, you're hearing it more and more, folks.
Goodness gracious.
My friend Charlie Culberson come to me with tears in his eyes. Big, strong man, Charlie Culberson, but he's crying.
I need the TakeGraphs music when we do this, because I need to get some
Is there gonna be TakeGraphs? Do we need to come up with a jingle or something?
We need I want an electric guitar riff where it's TakeGraphs. And,
yeah, we need some really dumb what they play on the big dumb sports radio shows that are hosted by Big Pete and the Booth, where it's stupid drive time radio sound effects where it's just after everything I say, just hit a button and you can hear a toilet flush for some reason.
Speaking of flush, let's flush the Giants down the drain because it's over.
Yeah, it's the worst. We can make this podcast so much stupider is what I'm getting at. We have barely scratched.
Has so much potential. The merch alone, just TakeGraphs. I mean, sound effects. There's all kinds of stuff.
Barely scratched the surface of our potential stupidity.
There you go. TakeGraphs. Look out for that this baseball season. This is gonna be great.
We'll be doing the takes.
We'll be doing the takes. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.